What does a man deprived of power over 45 million lives talk about? He justifies his tactical errors. He recalls his executed son-in-law. He complains about his former allies. At dawn, the former dictator faces the inevitability of the finale. His government is gone. He analyzes his ruined legacy in the face of imminent death. The gray morning light of April 28th fills the window frame. The prisoner sits in a dusty room. He is 61 years old. He speaks continuously about his family. The guards listen silently. His verbal output acts as a clinical marker of psychological collapse. He shifts rapidly between political defense and personal fixation. The captive calculates the survival chances of his children. He mentions his eldest son, Vittorio. Then he speaks of his daughter, Edda. He authorized the execution of her husband, Galeazzo Ciano, on January 11, 1944. This fact underscores the complete internal destruction of the leader's family. In the few hours, a firing squad will permanently interrupt these reflections. The monologue continues. He shifts the blame. The prisoner dissects his relationship with Adolf Hitler, heavily criticizing the German command for treating Italy strictly as a subordinate asset. This attempt to rationalize the pact fails. The dictator recognizes the fatal nature of the alliance. His personality disintegrates under the stress of total isolation. He speaks to the walls. The guards do not respond. His historical defense carries no weight. During the night deliberations, the partisan command issued the final execution order. Two key ideologues of the regime fell in the partisan hands within a 12-hour interval. 0 active units remained capable of reaching the prisoner within a 100-kilometer radius. By the morning of April 28th, radio intercepts confirmed the complete liquidation of the cabinet. Mussolini's isolation became total. The communication chain processed the data. Couriers ran updates to the command post. The continuous rustling sound of incoming paper dispatches filled the room. Each sheet registered the collapse of the state apparatus. Checkpoints secured the detainees. Fighters intercepted Alessandro Pavellini near Bergamo. He commanded the Black Brigades. Now he sat in captivity. Guards also detained Achille Starace near Como. He previously directed the National Fascist Party. The entire upper echelon of the Italian Social Republic collapsed, leaving the former dictator without a government to coordinate his rescue. Physical extraction became impossible. No loyalist force existed. The resistance dismantled the military grid completely. A radio man took another dispatch and logged a new high-level capture. The radioman filed the latest arrest report. The command staff now faced an immediate procedural crisis. Allied troops advanced rapidly toward the containment sector. How do you format a death sentence without a functioning state? Moderates demanded a formal trial. Radicals prepared their weapons. Commanders hunched over a wooden table. They checked their watches. They reviewed field directives. The pale light of a kerosene lamp illuminated the maps. A heavy smell of cheap tobacco filled the headquarters. The tactical reality dictated their timeline. The vanguard of the American Fifth Army stood less than 50 kilometers away. This geographic proximity imposed a rigid time limit on the command staff to finalize a legal strategy. The officers needed a verifiable verdict before the Americans arrived and seized the prisoner. The time deficit exposed deep ideological fractures. Communist partisans demanded immediate revolutionary justice. They pushed for a rapid field execution. Liberal resistance fighters advocated for civilian jurisdiction. They wanted an open public court. The conflict stalled the essential paperwork. The factions argued over the exact formatting of the tribunal protocols. The liberals insisted on drafting documents that cited specific articles of the penal code. The communists submitted blank execution warrants requiring only a single signature. Military field logic directly clashed with civil law. The approaching front line eventually forced a compromise. The entire debate consumed exactly 12 hours. The tribunal protocol extended beyond the dictator. Clara Petacci required a separate legal assessment. She sat on the bare floor of a peasant house. A woman accustomed to state receptions awaited a military verdict. Legally, she held 0 official posts. Tactically, the partisans identified her as a primary regime symbol. Her file documented 13 years as Mussolini's companion. Status evaluation began. Records proved complicity. The Petacci clan exploited this proximity. They orchestrated massive financial frauds. Immunity vanished. Inside the holding room, the dynamic shifted. Petacci tried to stabilize Mussolini. She projected calm. Panic remained visible. Past luxury provided no armor. Guards blocked exits. The resistance commanders bypassed standard civilian protocols and officially classified her as a primary political target. Hours before the resistance commanders formalized that specific target status, the primary prisoner initiated a tactic of financial bribery. What does a cornered dictator offer in exchange for his survival? He proposes the secret locations of fleeing officials and physical gold that has lost all market value. Heavy leather boots rhythmically compressed the uneven wooden floorboards. The wood creaked. The man who had maintained authoritarian state control for over 20 years paced the narrow perimeter. His physiological stress reaction manifested in constant erratic movement across the confined agricultural space. He abruptly stopped walking to initiate direct verbal negotiations with his armed captors. He proposed a trade. The former state leader had previously negotiated international military treaties with Adolf Hitler. Now, he addressed local factory workers from the 52nd Garibaldi Brigade. He offered them direct access to the hidden fascist gold reserves. These physical assets belonged to the Dongo convoy inventory, which financial logs estimated at 33 million lira. The local guards kept the aimed barrels of their loaded weapons fixed on his chest. This remained their exclusive physical response to the intelligence regarding the secret bank deposits. The captive rapidly exhausted his remaining diplomatic and financial leverage against the local patrol. His historical political capital held 0 operational value inside the unheated stone room. The guards ignored his words. The partisan personnel maintained their rigid firing stances without issuing any verbal counteroffers or acknowledging his previous status. The convoy silently rejected all transactions. Armed men shoved the captives into a cramped room and locked the heavy door. The command's chaotic night debates over the prisoners resulted directly from a local patrol's tactical success hours prior. The convoy reached Bonzanigo on the evening of April 27th. They secured the targets inside a remote peasant house. The location provided optimal logistics. It bypassed German patrols. It maintained a short supply line to the partisan headquarters. Physical space defined the isolation. The room was unheated. The cold texture of rough stone walls surrounded the prisoners. For decades, the dictator managed state affairs from the vast halls of Villa Torlonia. Now his operational radius shrank to a few square meters. Clara Petacci occupied the same confined sector. Guards cut off all external communication. The partisan unit established a rigid internal perimeter. Men with loaded rifles secured the hallway. They initiated a strict watch protocol to maintain continuous visual control over the high-value targets. The shift of each armed partisan at the door lasted 2 hours. How did the hunt for the dictator end? A short cipher. It crossed the radio network of northern Italy. The routine transport inspection isolated Benito Mussolini. Transmission to Milan took under 5 minutes via modified army radios. Radio operators tapped the keys. Frequencies synced. The network knew. Hundreds of scattered units in the mountains simultaneously received operational confirmation. The data validated their struggle. Facts replaced rumors. The myth died. A locked door held him. The partisans logged the final encrypted status report to the regional command headquarters at exactly 22 hours and 15 minutes. Before the regional command received that final encrypted message, the intercepted convoy underwent a strict physical division of its passengers. The heavy German escort initially seemed to be a reliable guarantee of salvation for the fleeing officials. In reality, the Wehrmacht officers were the first to surrender their Italian partners to secure their own survival. Colonel Fallmeyer initiated the separation protocol immediately upon encountering the partisan roadblock on the highway. The 38 trucks of the retreating column halted on the mountain road on April 27th. The partnership ended there. Fallmeyer extracted his official route sheets from a heavy leather dispatch case. The dry rustle of legitimate German documents provided a clear physical signal of his detachment from the fugitives. He handed the military papers to the local commander and physically stepped away from the designated Italian vehicles. Partisans sealed the perimeter. Armed fighters instantly closed the gap, forming a tight ring around the exposed group of fascist officials. The German unit claimed non-combatant transit status, legally classifying the transport of the Italians as a detached humanitarian action. The inspection teams systematically processed the occupants of the remaining vehicles along the stopped convoy. Fighters identified Clara Petacci during the secondary visual verification of a separate civilian passenger car. The woman was exactly 33 years old at the time of this unexpected road detention. Her documented presence in the column immediately corroborated the high-value status of the surrounding targets. Guards removed her from transport. Partisans placed Clara Petacci in total physical isolation from the rest of the captured group. What broke a 20-year facade of power? One intense stare from a partisan looking under a German helmet. Among the individuals detained alongside Petacci stood a target whose visual identification required only seconds. Giuseppe Negri approached the transport truck. He scanned the remaining passengers. One man sat deep in the cargo bed. A massive helmet covered his forehead. The steel shell belonged to a Luftwaffe non-commissioned officer. The fit was entirely unnatural. The heavy gear shifted loosely over the passenger's eyes. Negri stopped. He locked onto the exposed jawline. He analyzed the facial geometry. 20 years of propaganda had printed these exact physical traits across every Italian street. The visual match was undeniable. Mussolini registered the prolonged eye contact. He understood the camouflage failure. The dictator initiated a sudden motor response. He attempted to straighten his spine. He tried to elevate his chin to project physical dominance. The muscle memory of state speeches activated automatically. But the environment offered no podium. The posture correction failed. His shoulder muscles lost tension. He sagged back against the wooden truck boards. Negri whispered the target's identity to his squad. The data moved rapidly through the checkpoint perimeter. The resistance fighters shifted their weapons. The political myth dissolved on the spot. They observed only an aging man shrinking inside an oversized military coat. 7 partisan barrels aimed directly at his chest. Before Negri established visual contact, a systematic document check occurred. The procedure exposed severe physiological stress. 2 Italian identity cards fell from shaking hands onto the road. Dry cardboard slapped against the dirt. Urbano Lazzaro initiated the sweep. Partisans approached the vehicles. Men aimed their rifles. They demanded papers. They asked questions. The genuine German officers reacted with clinical efficiency, producing proper credentials and maintaining strict physical control to preserve their cover. Survival dictated strict routine. Disguised Italians broke. Motor skills collapsed. Hands trembled. Voices cracked under basic questioning. Accents failed. Panic destroyed their cover. They made simple errors. Italian military insignia remained pinned beneath their German greatcoats. One man hid in the rear. Thick bandages covered his head. He claimed a fresh combat injury. He lied. The gauze concealed a specific facial scar. A local fighter recognized his eyes. Partisans dragged the official out of the truck bed. What made the commander stop the convoy? Sweat on the soldiers' faces at 10 degrees. The order to scrutinize the papers came only after Urbano Lazzaro detected this thermal anomaly. He scanned the trucks. German military traffic was standard. The resistance usually let them pass. But the physical reactions of these men contradicted the environment. Lazzaro applied behavioral profiling. Past service in the Italian army trained his eye. Real Wehrmacht soldiers sat relaxed. These passengers sat rigid. Their tunics fit poorly. Then came the critical detail. Drops of sweat formed on the passengers' faces in the cold mountain wind. The air temperature near Lake Como in late April hovered around 10 degrees Celsius. Sweating indicated acute stress. Physiology betrayed the disguise. Regional partisan headquarters had already updated the inspection protocols. Lazaro linked the nervous behavior to fresh intelligence. The fighters tightened the perimeter. Morning radio intercepts confirmed the movement of high-value targets. Heavy transport trucks decelerated before armed men who completely blocked the solitary mountain road. This specific choke point near the village of Musso, established just a few hours earlier, enabled immediate visual passenger profiling. Fighters of the 52nd Garibaldi Brigade successfully controlled all key transport arteries leading directly toward the nearby Swiss border. Demographics dictated the inspection severity. Regional agricultural laborers and factory workers comprised the entire detachment. These guards recognized every single local resident by sight and reported any anomalies. Strangers faced immediate detention. On the morning of April 27th, the unit operated a strictly organized and unyielding filtration perimeter. Internal personnel records indicated a high percentage of former political prisoners and survivors of severe state interrogations. This documented history of prior detentions and family casualties provided a calculated drive to intercept fleeing officials. Armed inspectors systematically checked the interior of every transport vehicle, claiming official German military status. They physically cross-referenced the passengers' faces against their own detailed memories of regional fascist enforcers. Exceptions did not exist. At midday, the active roadblock detail numbered exactly 15 armed combatants. Wehrmacht officers distributed truck seats. Convoy Commander Hans Fallmeyer approved the detachment protocol on April 27th. Italians stood aside. German commanders calculated survival odds. They secured their own extraction routes. The alliance treaty expired instantly. Fallmeyer evaluated the roadblock threat. He scanned the Italian vehicles. Risk metrics exceeded acceptable limits. He authorized severance. Muffled voices leaked from the command car. Lieutenants called the Italians ballast. Liability exceeded asset value. They chose themselves. The Third Reich lacked central command. Adolf Hitler sat inside a bunker in Berlin. 800 kilometers separated them. Directives stopped. Command hierarchies dissolved completely. Survival dictated the next step. Options vanished. Headquarters had already distributed a documented contingency strategy to sacrifice the civilian refugees and secure a military escape. Capture guaranteed immediate execution without a trial. Fallmeyer directed the convoy along the western shore of Lake Como, driving straight into a tactical lockdown. Why did the neutral border become an insurmountable barrier? Swiss authorities implemented strict late-war customs protocols. Guards demanded pre-approved transit lists. The former dictator held no clearance. Mountains flanked the water. The narrow road created a geographic bottleneck. Partisan radio intercepts confirmed multiple armed roadblocks ahead. Resistance fighters distributed printed leaflets across the region. The paper contained a precise directive: 0 prisoner exchanges and 0 negotiations for fascist officials. Retreat was impossible. Switzerland sealed the perimeter. Border checkpoints processed only essential diplomatic staff. The neutral nation faced an influx of German and Italian personnel demanding sanctuary. Bern updated the entry regulations to reject unauthorized individuals. Guards matched identification documents against central registries. Swiss patrols turned the refugee transports back. In the dim light of the transport bed, the former dictator struggled with the leather straps of standard infantry gear. To bypass the closing partisan cordons along this route, Benito Mussolini had to completely abandon his own uniform. Custom-tailored gabardine, designed for imperial propaganda, gave way to a standard steel helmet intended to conceal fear. Mussolini stripped off his distinct jacket with its prominent insignia. He worked in silence. Mass-produced Wehrmacht equipment felt entirely different from the individually tailored garments of the Italian High Command. He wrapped himself in a late-war field-gray German greatcoat made of heavy wool and coarse synthetic rayon. The fabric hung loosely over his frame, lacking the precise measurements tailors used for grand parades. He pulled the rim of a standard M42 helmet low across his forehead. Cold metal cast a deep shadow over the facial features he once displayed to roaring crowds at Piazza Venezia. Discarding the original garments fully erased his recognizable public profile. This visual downgrade mirrored his total loss of command over the escaping convoy. He could no longer dictate who rode where or how the transport vehicles moved north. Clara Petacci rode separately in another truck packed with fleeing Italian officials. She had repeatedly rejected independent escape routes to stay inside the collapsing perimeter. He sat motionless among ordinary retreating soldiers in the rear cargo space. Nobody addressed him by rank. The heavy German overcoat lacked tactical purpose. It resulted directly from chaotic morning convoy formation in Como. Who comprised this convoy heading for the border at dawn? It carried the disorganized remnants of a dying regime. The date was the 27th of April, 1945. Milan fell. Logistics failed. Vehicles aligned randomly. High-ranking SS officers took priority seats. Italian fascist ministers boarded next. Their wives clutched locked wooden boxes. These containers held personal documents and remaining jewelry. Children stared through dirty vehicle windows. They watched the street panic. 3 weeks prior felt entirely different. Command operated from Gargnano. The dictator reviewed defense plans. He expected state survival. Illusion met reality. The front collapsed. Before the truck engines started, advancing Allied armor had already breached the strategic fortifications of the Gothic line. A man, huddled in an oversized German military overcoat, lay flat against the floorboards of a retreating transport vehicle. He previously directed the mobilization of 8 million soldiers across Italy. Now, his survival depended entirely on the throttle adjustments of an unknown corporal. The sudden administrative collapse of Milan provided the convoy an exact 24-hour operational window for a border extraction. Space compressed rapidly. Allied vanguard units severed the primary arterial roads heading north. On the morning of the 27th of April, the command chain still operated within the staging areas near Lake Como. By midday, that command structure dissolved into isolated vehicles attempting to navigate 50 kilometers of hostile mountainous terrain. The fugitive absorbed the mechanical vibration of the metal truck floor against his ribs, while anti-aircraft units escorted the fleeing officials toward Switzerland. Statistical probability dictates that top national leadership cannot survive a total front disintegration without pre-established evacuation routes. Il Duce possessed no such contingency plans. He relied instead on the impromptu protection of a retreating foreign military detachment. The 24-hour countdown terminated abruptly on the 28th of April, erasing the bureaucratic remnants of a 20-year totalitarian state. Geographical options narrowed from a national highway network down to a single checkpoint near Dongo. The route vanished. The final perimeter shrank to the dimensions of a modest cobblestone village square, bordered by low stone walls and ordinary residential buildings. The lead vehicle applied its brakes. The scattered military convoy halted permanently in the center of the plaza.